Welcome to the Weather Insights briefing, tropical briefing. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner, and this is Friday, September 27th. Jeff, all of a sudden, we're getting very active in the tropics, pretty late in the game here, but still, quite a few weeks of hurricane season left. So we've got one that we want to pay attention to in particular, as far as affecting the United States, possibly. That's disturbance number one. Yesterday, this one popped up with a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days, now up to a 30% chance of development. And then we have disturbance number two, just coming off the coast of Africa there, with the same odds, 30% chance of development over the next 7 days, moving west. Then we have Tropical Storm Joyce with winds minimal at 40 miles per hour, tracking northwest at 13 miles per hour. And then we have now Hurricane Isaac, a minimal hurricane at 75 miles per hour, continuing to move east-northeast at 18 miles per hour, just affecting shipping lanes. And then, of course, we have what's left of Helene there, now positioned, still a tropical depression, so tropical characteristics with winds at 35 miles per hour. And we'll get to the details of that. But a big, huge, scary rain event with Helene right now, and lots of cleanup effort, certainly in the next weeks and months with Helene. So taking a look at the infrared, there you see the disturbance just south of Dominican Republic, just west of the Leeward Islands there, the disturbance number one that we're tracking into the Western Caribbean next week. And where it goes from there, very up in the air. Early model runs are showing anywhere from the northeastern coast of Mexico, maybe north of Tampico, somewhere in that area, really all the way over to Pensacola. So another very wide range. And again, without a center, very hard to tell this far out where that is going to go, or if it'll even become a tropical cyclone. And then you see the intertropical convergence zone where the other two disturbances, or where Joyce and the other disturbances, still very active, waves coming off there. So we could see some more formation over the next few weeks, as we still have plenty of hurricane season left. And there's what's left of Helene. Man, what a storm. You know, it verified out, Jeff, with most of the models in terms of where it went and in terms of intensity. Really not anything too surprising based on what the models told us was going to happen with Helene.
Yeah, this was kind of the big one so far this season. Came like we talked about this time yesterday, was west of Tampa and is now currently up here in Kentucky. So crossing, I don't know, 4 or 5 states in the matter of a 24-hour period, and the damage has been done, not just from the wind. We'll look at each one of these. This is the rainfall and the inland rainfall that has happened up here in North Carolina and South Carolina. Just unbelievable, catastrophic flooding right now occurring in western North Carolina, western South Carolina, and eastern Tennessee on the other side of the Blue Ridge Mountains here. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Everything you see here in these dark red boxes are flash flood emergencies. And it's rare to get a flash flood emergency.
Yes.
And this morning we had 10 to 15
Wow.
separate flash flood emergencies in progress at one time.
Incredible.
And everything you see in the purple dots and icons is major flooding. Several of these creeks and rivers are at record levels. There was one I was looking at a little bit ago around Asheville that's 5 feet above the previous record. So, we all know how we kind of went through Harvey here and breaking records, and they are smashing records right now with flooding up here in western North Carolina. And there's some serious issues with some of the dams up here.
Yep.
Big concerns with some of the facilities and passing water through those structures, or water going over the top of these dams, and evacuations going on. It is just an absolute nightmare right now. And this inland flash flood threat, we've been talking about this. It wasn't just going to be a coastal event. This was going to come north and produce all this rain, and it's exactly what happened. And I still think a lot of people up there in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee have been caught off guard. I mean, we got people on rooftops. We have people in hospitals on rooftops that I don't know. They just didn't get it. They didn't know how bad it was going to be. But you bring that much water up in these mountains on saturated grounds, and you got big issues. And we'll talk about the wind. I've had some questions. It's interesting. People are like, well, this hit as a category 4 is 140. Where's the wind?
Yeah.
And that's somewhat of a valid question. One thing I want to say about the wind is the 140 is out over the open waters of the ocean of the Gulf of Mexico, and so you have very little friction.
Yep.
And as soon as that wind field crosses that coastline, you automatically start to reduce that wind speed dramatically as it pushes inland. And so you get the friction from the land and the trees and the buildings, and that brings down those wind speeds. The other thing you have to be really careful about is the observation sites may not have sampled the strongest winds, and or those observation sites might have been damaged or knocked out, or the power failed, and so they may not have reported the maximum wind at that location. And so some of these numbers you're seeing, for example, at this location here, 69, was likely not the maximum wind that happened in that area. It likely got higher. For whatever reason, the observation site didn't report it. And I know there was a lot of stick net sensors that were put out through this area, and that data it's not live. It takes time to get back. You have to go download it. And so I suspect we will see some higher winds show up here in the next few weeks as a lot of this data starts coming in. But the highest gust I saw was 102 up around Valdosta, Georgia, and that's 3 counties inland from the Gulf of Mexico. So that would be like Montgomery County here, Conroe in southeast Texas. And then I'm going to zoom out here. Look at the extent of the damaging winds over here on the East Coast, 75 at
Oh,
Savannah,
yeah.
and even up here at Augusta. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, 200 miles, maybe 300 miles inland, 82 miles an hour at Augusta. And look up here in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, 70 up around Clemson. And even in the 50s around Knoxville, Tennessee, 63 up here in Southern Virginia. So just a massive, massive extent of
Incredible.
inland wind damage that has occurred across this area. So not only do you have the flooding going on up here, but you got all kinds of trees and power lines down and just all kinds of damage. And you and I were talking about the power outages and sort of talking about how does this compare to Beryl. Beryl was very concentrated over 5 or 6 counties, 10 counties here in Southeast Texas. This is over 7 or 8 states that we have almost 4.7 million people without power.
Incredible. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you mentioned Augusta. Of course, a lot of people, especially golf fans, wondering about the Masters golf course there. Be interesting. I haven't seen any official reports what happened, but with 82-mile-an-hour gusts, I can only imagine what I'm sure there's some sort of damage there, but to what extent, don't have any idea right now. And also, when you were talking about those wind speeds, Jeff, I read a report. I can't remember the source. I wish I could cite it, but read a report about dropping a drone in as opposed to sending out a reconnaissance plane right before landfall. This was over the ocean where that drone got to lower levels that were way too dangerous for a Hurricane Hunter aircraft and recorded brief winds over 150 miles an hour. Again, that's not verified. It's something I read, but not surprising, over water, like you said, with no friction in a storm this strong.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot
Yeah.
of data that gets compiled. Yesterday was you're throwing everything at it. You're trying to keep up with the intensification process that's taking place and get that messaging out and everything. And so the weeks to come, the months to come is where you go back and you actually see what you really collected, what's good and
Right.
what's bad. Just because something recorded something doesn't mean it's necessarily good. We
Right.
see issues from time to time with contamination of data from rain or whatever, and so there's a lot of stuff out there. I saw some reports yesterday that there was 160-mile-an-hour winds. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
There was some misinformation going around yesterday evening. This was a Category 5 and all that kind of stuff, and just from what I've seen and the damage images, this looks like it was, at least as it came in across the Florida Panhandle or the Florida Big Bend area, there probably a high end 3 or a low end 4, just from the
Mhm.
damage I've seen. Again, every storm is different, and so the storm was intensifying up to landfall. It had a lot of lightning, a lot of downdrafts and stuff in the eye wall. But that doesn't always. Sometimes when these storms make landfall at night, they perform differently than they when they make landfall during the
Yeah.
day. And getting that wind down to the surface can sometimes be a little bit different. And so we'll have to see again. Premature at this point to make a lot of final determinations on this because we don't have all the data. There's data out there we haven't seen yet, even us and meteorologists, and so we'll
Yeah.
see where it ends up. One thing I do want to talk about we didn't mention is the surge.
Mm,
We likely had we definitely had 9 feet, no 9.5 feet at Cedar Key. That blew the previous record out of the water by 2 feet.
yep.
And just horrible storm surge down around the Tampa Bay area. Almost every single tide gauge in Tampa Bay broke their storm surge records. Either from the March '93 storm, some of them go back all the way to 1921, the 1921 hurricane in the Tampa Bay area. And so big issues down in Tampa Bay, a lot of flooding, a lot of homes were flooded. Clearwater Beach up towards Tarpon Springs, and then you get up towards Cedar Key, Horseshoe Beach, Keaton Beach, those areas that finally have got some response down in those areas this afternoon and seen some of the images, and it's exactly what you would expect. Homes washed off their pilings, homes destroyed. The damage is exactly what we thought it was going to be up there in that Florida Big Bend. The only silver lining, there just wasn't a lot of structures up there. So where Helene came in is a relatively rural and marsh and natural forest area. And that's the only silver lining in this at all is that this wasn't a huge population portion of the coast like we had around the Tampa St. Pete area. But even there, that 7 to 8 feet got a lot of homes. We don't have numbers yet, but the numbers are definitely going to be well up into the thousands when you start talking about flooded structures, flooded homes, damaged homes, and then whatever turns out up here in Western North Carolina with all the flooding. I mean, the flooding there is going to be just beyond disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. And boy, I know we were looking at those storm surge models, especially for Tampa Bay. I was struggling with that 6 to 8 feet. We saw that for several days before landfall, and I thought, well, maybe on the lower end or something like that, especially in the last 24 hours when you saw the position of the storm. And sure enough, record storm surge there, just all along that western Florida coast, several records broken in that area. So,
Yeah, and I think the thing is, it's human nature to focus on the big values. Everybody's
yes.
focused on the 15 to 20 foot,
Mm,
and oh, it's not that bad up at or it's not going to be that bad down at Tampa because it's only 6 feet, it's only 8 feet, but it's extraordinarily damaging when you put 4 or 5 feet of water in your house. And this
yeah.
is this is seawater. This comes with everything that you see at the beach, the marsh, the seaweed, the grass, the sand, all of that stuff gets into the structure. I saw some images yesterday, the wave action crashing into people's windows and stuff like that. And so I think, you know, a lot of people kind of tuned out the significant threat because it wasn't those really high values down there around Tampa Bay. And I think some people were caught off guard. Just from what I could see here, sitting thousands of miles away, was a lot of people did not necessarily heed those evacuation orders and were needing help either last night or this morning. And once again, were caught off guard by the water coming in and how quickly it came in. And we talked about this at length yesterday about how fast this water is going to come up as that wind comes on shore. And that's exactly what happened last night. I think the tide gauge, it's hard to tell from the tide gauge data. It looks like some of these gauges stopped reporting again, possibly before it reached that peak. But the Cedar Key gauge looked like it continued to report, and it at one point last night it was rising about a foot every 15 minutes. So, and that's what happens, and it's just this flow and push of water that comes up to the coast and comes inland, and that's why you can see these entire structures. They just get picked up and they just get moved. They're all still intact, but they just get lifted and moved along, and then eventually disintegrate into debris as they move along. And so, just this is one of those that's going to take a long time to recover from. These power outages all up through here and these areas are going to take, probably weeks. I mean, just the geographic footprint of this is massive.
Yes, it is. And, you were talking about the tide and how it rushes in and all that, the full force of it. I think that was illustrated pretty well during our live stream yesterday when we were showing those live shots, especially around the bridges where you just see the white caps going over the bridge and under the bridge and how fast that water was rushing in. Yeah, that is nothing to play around with. And to your point about it being salt water too, anything that's metal, whether it's in your home or car or whatever, that salt water is just going to corrode. So yeah, even any tide, even though it isn't these terribly high tides that can get over your head, can do a lot of damage to your point, especially with it being salt water.
This is the tidal trace here at Cedar Key. So the gauge did appear to stay up. So the peak was about 9.3 feet. The previous record was 6.8. So
Mm-hmm.
well over the previous record. But you can see how quickly that water came up, and then also how quickly
Went down.
that water went down.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a very classic storm surge event where it rushes in, it does the damage, and then it pulls back out. And like today, it's back to normal on the coast there for the most part there in the Florida Big Bend Panhandle area. So unfortunately, the damage has been done, and this will definitely be one for the record books in that part of Florida and even up into the southeast United States.
Absolutely. And as we saw earlier, we're not quite done. We've got some other storms out there. We've got the one moving in the Western Caribbean that we mentioned with a 30% chance of development that we will be tracking. We'll be having updates in the upcoming week right here on Weather Insights, where if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn those notifications on, and we'll keep you informed of what's going on in the tropics for the remaining few weeks of this hurricane season. Jeff, thank you very much.